We've now seen enough of morphemes to be able to make up a classification system for them, a kind of taxonomy, the natural classes of morphemes, just as we would with animals in turning them into mammals and insects and so forth. Morphemes belong to different classes depending on a whole bunch of different ways of categorizing them, which we've already really looked at. The first way we can check what sort of morpheme we have is to ask ourselves, is it a lexeme or not? Free morphemes are lexemes. Anything that's a free morpheme can be, if you like, a word in its own right. For example, the word arrange, we know what arrange is. It has a grammatical category, it's a verb, and so it's a lexeme and it has a meaning. It has the three bits that are required for a lexeme to exist. It has form, it has grammatical function, and it has meaning. Bound morphemes are not lexemes in their own right. They need to attach to something in order to be part of a lexeme. So ment can't exist as a word on its own, and we show that by putting a little hyphen at the end, at the left-hand end in this case. The reason for that is that bound morphemes have attachment properties, and those attachment properties are in the nature of a little hook that says I must hook onto something, in the case of ment, something on my left. Well, if we hook it up to arrange, we get arrangement. We don't get ment arrange. That's not possible. So let's see how good we are at this. ATION is bound. It doesn't make a word on its own. Nation, however, is a word on its own. It's a lexeme. Pre is not a lexeme. And of course, if we ask where's the little hook, well, the little hook is at the right-hand end. Post is interesting because there are two posts. One is the thing you put in the ground, and that's a lexeme, so it's a free morpheme. But there is also post this and post that, meaning to come after, and that's clearly not a free morpheme. That has to attach to something, so it's bound. Angle is free, ibble is bound, infra is bound, and out seems to be both. In some cases it's a preposition, he went out, and then in other cases we've got things like to outdo someone. Well, maybe that's a prefix, and therefore bound. We've already had a good look at these forms of category, so this is by way of revision. A stem, you'll remember, is the form of the base of a morphologically complex word to which an affix is attached. So affixes attach to stems. We can separate affixes into two classes in English. There are the ones that come before the stem, and there are ones that come after the stem. And affixes seem to belong to either one or the other, and never both. Prefixes come before stems, suffixes come after stems, and there are languages in which there are infixes. Infixes come inside the stem. English doesn't have regular infixing. So let's see if we can separate the affixes from the stems and decide what sort of affix we've got. In the case of trains, the S comes off the end and it's a suffix. In succeeded, the ed, the past tense, comes off the end and it's a suffix. In lighter, er is a suffix. Now what about predetermined? Here we have a problem because we've got pre at the beginning, that's a prefix, and ed at the end, which is a suffix. How do we decide, since the structure of this word is binary, which one belongs with which stem? We have two choices. Either pre goes with determined, which means that something is determined beforehand, or we have to predetermine, which is to decide beforehand, and the ed is the past tense of that. Well, I'll leave you to think about that, but in general, it's a pretty safe bet in English that inflectional affixes come last. They come on the end of everything, if there is one. So this should be to predetermine, that is, decide something beforehand, in the past tense. If something is predetermined, then it has been predetermined in the past, and I think that's the right answer. Retroactive, or retro, comes off the front. It's a prefix, but it's undergoing an interesting change. It used to be a prefix only, but now the word retro seems to have taken off on its own and become a kind of adjective. People go to used clothing shops and buy clothing which is retro. I've got this new retro outfit. That's just a straight adjective, and we can tell that because you can be more retro and most retro. Well, there was a time when that was just simply a prefix. In the case of confusion, the suffix comes off first because it's a plural, and then we have to ask, are there any more? And the answer is yes. We've got a verb confuse to which ion has been added. Can con become a prefix? Confuse. Probably not in English. The con was certainly a prefix at one stage, but probably not in English at this stage anyway, at our stage. Instructional, right, that's instruction with al coming off the end as an affix. Instruct with ion coming off the end as a suffix. And then in and struct, instruct, probably not. There's one area that perhaps is not as obvious, and that is there are stems which are bound. Remember that free morphemes are lexemes, but stems aren't necessarily lexemes. Here are some examples. They show that not all stems are free. The classic example is the word cranberry. Well, berry is certainly free. What about the word cran? Is it a prefix? Well, if it was a prefix, we'd expect it on other words. Prefixes are productive to a greater or lesser extent. This one only turns up in cranberry. There are some product names like cranapple juice where it's been hijacked by advertising copywriters, but generally the word cran has to be a stem, so this is something like a compound word where the cran bit only occurs in this one word. And there are other berry words like huckleberry and so on where we also just have a bound stem. So bound stems exist, but they're not very common. What do we do with these cases? Presume, resume, subsume. Is the sume bit a bound stem and the pre and re and sub are prefixes? Well, there's a lot of interest in those. They are borrowed words, and certainly pre and re and sub are prefixes, but whether we have a regular process here or whether these are just borrowed words that show the morphology of their past is an interesting question. It's not one that's easy to answer, and maybe it's worth an essay or two in a course. There are lots more words like that. You can find them if you look up Latin dictionaries quite often.